the difference between how the blue uniform police would relate to people in Zuccotti when the white shirt inspectors weren't around was quite marked. There was a lot of fraternization, and I have a very good friend who I admire immensely, John Friesen, who's in the park, comes out of Oakland, and when they came that night to clear out Zuccotti, John and another friend of mine, Zach Solomon, and others used heavy locks to chain themselves together around the kitchen, and the police, for all their infiltration and monitoring, weren't prepared for this lockdown and had to bring in an outside truck to cut these locks apart. But as John was being confronted by the police, he told me he would look at the officers' badge names to try and address them by their name and say to them, you know, you have a choice. You have a choice in what you do. Now, maybe most of them didn't hear him, but I can guarantee you some of them heard him. And that's how movements like this imperceptibly chip away at the dead edifice, because inside that edifice, they know how dead and hollow it is even more than we do, and how corrupt it is. And that's why they're so frightened.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier about criminals in this university. Would you add a little bit about people like Henry Kissinger, relationship with Harvard, Robert McNamara, and other people related to the industrial complex, and the bell curve experiments, which are, you know, racist theories?
Well, I mean, he's asking about figures like Henry Kissinger and McNamara and others who have been closely associated with Harvard. This is Harvard's role. This is what Harvard does. Harvard feeds and maintains the plutocracy, and always has, and the power elite. It gives polish to figures like Kissinger and McNamara, who should spend the rest of their lives in jail and should have never been allowed to escape from the war crimes that they committed. The power of what Occupy Harvard is doing is that by subverting that narrative, they are exposing who these people are, so that when they're hissed and booed as they walk out of the economics class and they're confronted, was it by their Republican club in their sweaters? Sort of out of Animal House, isn't it? I mean, these guys are really dweeby. And they rip that public relations facade apart, and they allow the outside world to see what's on the inside, and it doesn't look too pretty, does it?
Hey, Chris, a couple of things. One, of you, what do you think is the responsibility of alumni in this? And two, have you considered giving your bed tonight to someone homeless in the square, or a service worker, or?
That's a good idea. I don't know if they'll let them in the faculty club.
Come on.
What's the role of alumni? Well,
what
I mean,
would you like to see?
Well, I'd like to see the same thing I'd like to see against Israel, which is an economic boycott
Woo!
for what they're doing to the Palestinians. I am an alumni, and I've economically boycotted Harvard since I graduated, but that's because I don't make any money.
So you talked about treating police people as human beings, and I totally agree with that. I think that what they said, or what they must have done in Zuccotti Park, was pretty effective, you know, like recognizing them as human beings. But how can you justify the response of the police, the fact that they didn't respect the protesters as human beings? How can you justify the police brutality that knocked people out and shed blood at Zuccotti?
You can't justify it. But the point is that look at the reaction when campus police pepper spray students at UC Davis. Look at the reaction when the New York City police and Inspector Anthony Bologna pepper spray women seated on a sidewalk held in by orange fencing. It is a clear indication of, and I think it expresses the dichotomy between us and them. We have something to offer. We have something to say. The only language they're capable of speaking is the language of force. And it exposes them for who they are. It's not just, and it's not fair. And as somebody who has had to struggle with PTSD, when I left to get arrested in Washington a couple years ago, my wife's parting words when I left the house was, just promise me you won't hit a cop. You can't. You have to. You know, one of the things that's fascinating about when we've done these arrests in front of the White House with Veterans for Peace is that most of the Washington, D.C. police force, I think is true for many police forces, they're in the National Guard and they've all been to Iraq and Afghanistan. And they treated the veterans with incredible deference. And actually, as we had the cuffs put on our hands behind our back, a lot of the police would say, keep doing what you're doing because these wars stink. That is exactly, I think, a glimmer of what's happening within the structures of control. In New York City, these big financial firms like Goldman Sachs and Citibank, they hire these policemen for $37 an hour as rent-a-cops. And you can be sure that these guys in their $8,000 suits walk past them as if they're, you know, invisible, the same way they walk past every other service industry worker inside their building. These cops aren't stupid. These cops know what's going on. They have families who have had homes foreclosed. I'm not excusing what they do. In the end, they have to make a moral decision and a difficult decision. And yet, on the other hand, they're the weak link in the chain. And when we break that link, we win. And that has been true with every single revolution throughout human history, including the Russian Revolution, which was a bloodless revolution. The armed putsch came afterwards, led by Lenin and the Bolsheviks. The overthrow of the Tsar, not bloodless on the part of the Cossacks and the secret police and others, but largely bloodless, and that was true in Eastern Europe. It's when the forces of control send down the message to Wenceslas Square in Prague to shoot. And on the first night of the protests in Prague, they did shoot. 7 people were killed. I was there. And they won't, that it's over. And I think that this system, this corporate system, is as decayed, as corrupt, as hollow, and as vulnerable as the communist regimes that I saw topple in 1989. Thank you very much.